We live in a world where the internet is almost everywhere and cloud-based software is vital. What happens, though, when it doesn't work? That's what happened on Tuesday with companies as vastly different as fast food restaurants and media broadcasters scrambling to repair their data links in order to carry on functioning. Let's find out more about it with the Innovation Officer of tech firm Origina, Rowan O'Donoghue, who joins us now. Welcome to the programme. So what went wrong and how widespread were the problems?
Yeah, good morning. I guess, yesterday what we saw a major outage in the internet for a company called Cloudflare. And I guess what we know so far is that just quite simply a configuration file just exploded in size and I guess the controls in place to manage it failed, and that, overloaded part of the network, and it took out everything from X, which is formerly known as Twitter, ChatGPT, and we saw online e-commerce go down. So thousands of online stores, even over to New Jersey Transit in the US, and even payment systems in the high street in the UK. So it was pretty widespread in terms of the impact it had across the globe.
Is this sort of thing surprising to you, or is it the kind of thing we're going to have to get used to?
It is not surprising. It's becoming more, it's happening more often. I think the last outage we saw was nearly to the day, a similar outage with AWS. And I think the reality here is what the internet may look decentralized on the surface, but in reality, behind the scenes, we've consolidated this to a number of major players like, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, a few cloud or a few payment companies. And when one of them slips, I guess the reality is the ripple effect is seen globally. And I think as we consolidate that further, it just highlights that, these organizations have built they build trust. They do a great job in terms of the services they provide. That instills confidence. But with that confidence comes, the world building its infrastructure and its systems and its e-commerce platforms on these. And when there's an outage, unfortunately, all of these organizations inherit that risk. And when there's a failure, we all fail. And when there's a recovery, we all recover together.
Yeah, you mentioned AWS, Amazon Web Services, I think. So then how do you mitigate, how should we mitigate against the kind of risks you've been describing?
Yeah, I think we're not going to prevent failures. More failures have happened. I think the key message for leaders is what we need to do is, from a dependency point of view, we need to make sure that, we're choosing those dependencies. So for any organization, we need to build resilience in mind. I was actually caught up in this yesterday myself. I was doing an online booking for transport to the US. The website worked fine. So that organization, their website was not affected. But what did get affected was the 3D secure system behind the scenes. So I think organizations need to look at, they need to map their dependencies. Their own systems might be fine, but what in my ecosystem of suppliers may also be affected. And the golden question is, if this provider goes down for an hour, does my business go with it? And I guess if the answer to that is you've got a real sovereignty problem. And in short, good architecture means having those fallback paths. So if, a major player like Cloudflare fails, you're not susceptible to that outage. You have an alternative method to keep your systems online and no single point of failure.
Yeah, but it sounds like quite a lot of major companies didn't have that sort of backup plan in place.
Yes, and I think this comes back to the trust. Everyone just assumed that in the cloud, everything works behind the scenes, redundancy is built in. And I think if you make that assumption, unfortunately, you're going to get called out by it. And I think that is the responsibility of organizations to make sure that no matter where your technology or your platforms are placed, whether it's on-premise, you can have the same issue. Your data center provider or a piece of server, or a piece of hardware, could fail. But equally, if you move to the cloud, you need to understand what to do, what's behind these organizations, what systems do they have in place, what recoverability and redundancy do they have. That is a responsibility people still bear, unfortunately, when you move to the cloud.
All right. Rowan O'Donoghue, thank you very much indeed. Innovation Officer for the tech firm Origina, talking about that outage yesterday affecting Twitter, X as it's now known, and ChatGPT and many others. All seems to be resolved now, though, as Rowan was saying, we should be steeling ourselves for similar problems in the future, as so much of our world now runs on these systems.